Hello, and thank you for viewing this video segment titled Getting Started with Cloud Computing, Choosing the Right Workload to Put into a Cloud Environment. I'm Lynda Stadtmueller, Program Manager for Business Communication Services at Frost Sullivan, and I'll be your host today. This is the first video in our three-part series on cloud computing featuring our panel of IBM cloud leaders. Rick Telford, Vice President, IBM Cloud Services, Rich Cocchiara, Distinguished Engineer and Chief Technology Officer for Business Continuity and Resilience Services, and Chris Lovejoy, Vice President, IBM Security Strategy. We hope you find this discussion engaging and relevant, and we encourage you to view the other two videos in the series. Video 2, Ensuring Your Cloud is Available and Resilient, and Video 3, Managing Security in the Cloud. Okay, let's get started. Rick. Most enterprises today manage multiple cloud environments, third-party hosted, internally managed, fully outsourced. And I know IBM offers multiple cloud delivery models. With so many options available, how should enterprises approach the decision of which workload belongs in which environment?
That's a very good question. We work with clients every day to look at what they do in terms of their IT services and help them break down what is their most mission critical services, what we call tier 1 services, and then on down the line. So one rule of thumb is to do that breakdown. And when you do that, you find out that your most important workloads are about 20% of everything you do. The other 80% are good candidates to start looking at what makes sense to move to the cloud, either move to a private cloud, something like a development and test cloud, for example, or to the public cloud, and looking for a cloud provider that can do that. If it's not mission critical, if it's not something that you feel you want to hold close to the vest or run in your IT data center the way you do it today, and some people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, then it's probably a good candidate to move to the cloud. And then there's a variety of, as you mentioned, a variety of delivery models, whether public or private, and you can go through steps to figure out what makes sense for those workloads.
Yeah, let me add one thing on that from a security perspective, because I think that there's a level of abstraction that's important. When you're thinking about cloud workloads, what I find customers looking at is data and the sensitivity of the data. Sometimes they're thinking about the criticality of the service, but they're not necessarily thinking about the data, per se. And the second thing is the availability of that service to the consumer. And so looking at those two things and then overlaying the concept of compliance and asking yourself, what are the compliance requirements that are associated with either this level of service and data? And looking at those three elements also helps you determine whether or not something is, worthy of being in a public cloud, in a private cloud, et cetera.
Well, for an enterprise just starting in the cloud, which workloads make sense to move first?
Well, I mentioned development and test, and that's one that I work with clients a lot to say, if you're not totally comfortable with the cloud in terms of your production workloads, start with your pre-production workloads. And development and test workloads are something that makes sense for either a private or a public cloud. At a minimum, setting up a private cloud pool, if you do a lot of software development or even application testing, pre-production staging of your business applications, do that in the cloud. Dynamically provision those servers when you need them, give them back when the testing is done, or give it back when the development's done. You can create a very nice internal pool or a private cloud of servers and software that can be dynamically provisioned to your end users when they need them and then return back. Or you can move that development and test workload to the private, or the public cloud, like the IBM cloud, where all the same facilities are available for dynamic provisioning, and then it's just a pay-as-you-go model, so you don't even have the capital issues with the private cloud. So development and test is a great place to start. Collaboration, moving some of your email, web conferencing, team rooms, those type of applications is another great place to start, because you have that pay-as-you-go model in the public cloud, which is very nice when you have temporary team rooms or temporary web conferencing. And then another one that a lot of folks like to start with is desktop, either in a private cloud or a public cloud, where a desktop cloud allows you to get away from that one employee, one PC physical model and start moving some of your employees to a virtual model where they can go to any device, and as long as it has a browser, they can get to their virtual desktop and work, and it behaves exactly like it would behave as if it was a physical desktop. So hopefully those are three examples that I've seen a lot of clients move into.
One other workload, Rick, that a lot of customers are looking at is their disaster recovery and backup workload. That has consistently come up as something that they're interested in. In fact, last year's CIO study indicated that it was the number 3 on the type of workload that customers were looking at moving towards a cloud. We've been offering backup services or information protection services for over 3 years now. And that kind of a cloud service is something that's very attractive to clients because they have the ability to use that, consume it, and ensure that the data is protected and it's there and it's available to them. And then also, they can also release it back when they no longer need it. So from a cloud perspective, backup and disaster recovery is another workload that is very attractive to our clients.
Let's talk about hybrid clouds for a minute. What does that mean to IBM, and how should enterprises compare hybrid public and private clouds for their workloads?
Yeah, very good question, because hybrid clouds really represent what we believe is sort of the best of both worlds, and it brings around this aspect of flexibility. So all a hybrid cloud is that you have a workload where you have some of it running in a private cloud model and some of it running in a public cloud model, and you decide when to shift back and forth, and to have the flexibility. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's something that IBM has been investing in for a while, and we bought companies like Cast Iron to help in the whole hybrid model, because what you want to be able to do is give the enterprise that level of flexibility. So let's go back to my example of development and test. You may have 100 servers in your development and test private cloud, but for certain times of the year you need 200. So in a hybrid cloud environment, you're not limited. You run out of your private cloud, and then a developer comes in and says, I need 5 servers. You can seamlessly overflow that to the IBM public cloud. And you can think about that for a lot of workloads. Collaboration, and another example I gave before, we have some clients that run their email internally for most of their regular employees, but then they use Lotus Live, a public cloud, for temporary employees, contractors, part-timers. And so they can do that sort of mix and match of both a public and private environment. We believe any enterprise of a large size, that's sort of the model that they'll be going to. They'll have some workloads that are public and some that are strictly private, but a lot of their workloads they'll have in this hybrid environment, so they have that flexibility.
And I think one area that every company has to examine when they're looking at utilizing that hybrid approach is the availability issues. Ensuring that their architecture, and I do mean architecture, where they're combining their private cloud or their private architecture with a third-party provider, such as a cloud provider like IBM, that it works and that you've got availability covered, that the provider that you are going with always is able to give you the kind of service that you're looking for. So one thing I always recommend to clients when they're looking at a hybrid cloud is how good is the service provider that you're going with? How good is that cloud provider? Is it going to add to your availability, or is it going to take away? And when you do this, make sure that the architecture that you derive is combining both the availability of your cloud provider with the availability of your own infrastructure to give you the kind of improvement that I think most of our customers are looking for.
Rick, do clouds differ by industry? What are you seeing in terms of cloud adoption by different industries?
Well, I think a lot of the value propositions of cloud spreads across all industries. So in some cases we see, regardless of industry, adoption being the same. But there is examples of where, depending on what the biggest pain point is for that industry, they may lead with certain cloud workloads that address that pain point. In the financial services sector, for example, cost savings has been critical. Where can they cut costs? And so a lot of the work we've done in the financial services sector has been in development and test and similar private clouds where they have an a data center which isn't the most efficient. They have lots of silos and islands of IT that they're using their private cloud to converge and get better capacity utilization with less labor. So they get a double hit there in cost savings. It takes fewer people to run a cloud, and then they also get much better utilization of the hardware they have. Now, take something like healthcare. Healthcare, the problem has been sharing of information so that doctors can get access to the same medical information about a patient as another doctor. So the primary care physician and the specialist want to have access to the patient records, any x-rays, MRIs, etc. So a lot of what we've been doing in the healthcare industry has been around data clouds and information sharing clouds. So that, a collaborative care cloud where people can put where a doctor's group can put all patient information and every doctor has equal access. So the sharing aspects of cloud has been critical in something like healthcare. And then finally, you look at something like government and education, higher ed or, K through 12. Access has been a key issue. How do they get greater access to the information they have, whether it's a government agency who wants to get information about their services out to citizens, or sharing of information and access to property records by the police department or a municipal cloud, or in schools where they just want to have greater access to IT for students who otherwise wouldn't have them. So cloud lends itself very well because of the ubiquitous nature and the network access and some of the other advantages of a cloud infrastructure, lends itself very well to giving you that additional access. So those are at least some examples of where, based on the pain point, they've prioritized what cloud workloads they would go to.
It seems that where we're seeing a lot of pickup and curiosity about cloud computing is from industries that are highly regulated. So healthcare is one of the examples. These are industries where cost cutting, as you've said, is a primary driver for, movement of the cloud to the cloud. But when you look at the cost of compliance today, the cost of securing, personally identifiable information, it's significant. And what these organizations that are talking to us are saying is that the ability to scale up, scale down security control, the ability to centralize audit and compliance is providing them with better security value at lower overall cost. So interestingly enough, even though there is a lot of question about some of the higher risk workloads going into clouds, the reality is that for many industries that are regulated in the business of sharing personally identifiable information, security and compliance advantages in the cloud are actually drawing them into that service model.
Well, thank you to our panel and to you, our viewers, for joining us today. Please look for the other videos in the series, and for information on cloud computing, turn to www.ibm.com/cloud. Thank you.